Germany's adherence prevents Operation Barbarossa. So in your mod, Germany's going to adhere to it. Axis achieves key victories, including the Battle of Britain. Yeah. Well, so the Battle of the thing is, successful strikes on U.S. carriers in the Pacific. Germany takes limited progress in nuclear research, but does not develop atomic weapons. Okay, I gotta look a couple things up right now. So, the one thing is that you would have to, if you're like delving deep into the lore and the history of your mod, you would have to change something that Germany does to, I think, to win the Battle of Britain, because Germany lost the Battle of Britain like a year before Operation Barbarossa, and the Battle of Britain is where Germany lost most of its air power, because as a video I watched a few days ago explained, when all of your planes, or when all your best pilots are going into battle over a foreign territory, even if they eject, they're still landing in a foreign territory and an island at that. So they're not coming back, and that really sucked away a lot of Germany's air power, which they were dominant at the beginning of Barbarossa, but it prevented them from having a more prevented the Luftwaffe from having more of an impact that could have helped Barbarossa play out differently. Yeah, it was Alt History Hub. It was Cody. As the conflict drags into the late 40s with neither side able to achieve victory. I mean, if Germany could have forced an armistice with Britain, it would have prevented any kind of D-Day. The only thing is, I still think America could have landed in France, but if Germany forced an armistice with Britain, that would increase the odds of Franco joining the Axis, which makes Africa an even harder get, particularly the west coast of Africa. So it would have been an incredible undertaking for the U.S. to try and get into Europe, I think. Dude, that's awesome, Turning Worlds. Yeah, I think just from what I've read, depending on how deep you're going into the lore, you would explain how they won the Battle of Britain. Maybe Germany didn't focus so much on the Wunderwaffen, the wonder weapons, so that allowed more resources into the Luftwaffe. Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested. Are you still in active development, or is there an alpha or a beta in the workshop? That, yeah, and like I said, it's not a big sticking point. It's just from what we know of how the Battle of Britain played out and when it happened, and yeah, a lot of Germany's experienced pilots were done before Barbarossa happened, Sorry, what was the mod called? Even hell flees. And please don't tell me. Please tell me you're sticking with a... I'm setting up a wiki as we speak, and this is an active development. We'll hopefully release an alpha beta testing. Okay. I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. Whenever you release an alpha in the workshop, join... You can... I don't know. The Discord link. I'm going to throw a link to the Discord in the chat, but or pop in... a stream and tell me that it's done so I can check it out because it sounds interesting. Yeah, the video I watched was Alt History. Alt History Hub. Keys to Alt History.
Hey there, kids.
All right,
It's not your dad, but your lore dad. Here to share with you how I make alternate history. This is a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I didn't want to do it until I had proven myself. Now that I have 6,000 subscribers, consider this my 6,000 subscriber special. And of course, thank you to everyone for subscribing. I found it very hard to make this video due to the sheer amount of information. When you think of alternate history, the most common premises are ideas that are usually the following. What if Germany won World War I? What if the Axis won World War II? What if the South won the Civil War? And what if the Roman Empire lived on? The first major pitfall that people, myself included, fall for is that they think that the premise is the point of divergence. This is not the case. For example, let's do a quick Central Powers win World War I scenario. Okay. How do they win? Well, let's say that the Germans don't instigate conflict with the USA. Why? Oh, well, they don't do unrestricted submarine warfare. Why?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they just don't. In this case, the point of divergence simply is the Germans don't do this thing that I think would have prevented them from losing World War I. And I don't really consider this to be a good point of divergence. For one, you're taking the German high command of our history and universally applying a don't sink convoys idea in their head. Every action they had taken prior to that point is magically removed solely for the sake of protecting Germany from losing World War I. Bad points of divergence create plot armor and don't make for engaging stories. Secondly, the point of divergence that you made may not actually give you the result that you want. Germany not pursuing unrestricted submarine warfare would lead to the Entente's supply lines to be far more functional due to lack of effective submarine warfare. Sure, the USA might have joined the war.
No. Because while...
But would Germany actually win if the Americans hadn't showed up? Some people may realize this is a problem, and then add a second point of divergence in order to make the scenario more realistic. But this is another pitfall. You have now exponentially increased the amount of work that you need to do to justify the scenario. An example of this happening was when I was working on Aftershocks of the Revolutions 1, the first one.
Hey, this guy plays Hoi 4!
What if the 1848 revolutions happened differently? And it became to be interpreted by developers as every revolution past 1848 happens differently. This open-ended approach led to each regional developer to have incredible creative freedom, which made for interesting scenarios. But it had the adverse effect of making the lore incomprehensible and incoherent. Each region's lore contradicted each other's, and it made it impossible to answer historical questions, and essentially became, this thing happens because it's cool. If you want to learn more about what we learned,
that's why we do alt history, Dad. Because it's cool, man.
From Aftershocks of the Revolutions 1 going into Aftershocks of the Revolutions 2, check out the Walking with Lore Dad podcast on my second channel, No Lore. We've discussed why working backwards can lead to multiple points of divergence and why that's bad. But what are you supposed to do instead? Instead of working backwards, we move forwards. We establish a point of divergence first, and then...
But you can't really do that because if you want a piece of alt history, you have to pick, there are specific events and points in history that give a rise to the ideas of alt history. What if this specific point of divergence didn't happen? So, I mean, I haven't watched this part yet, but you have to have a you have to have a tag. You have to start with an idea, and I can kind of understand. I may be understanding what he's saying, maybe not. But like, what if the Central Powers won World War One? That's your premise, okay? Then you work backwards far enough to why did World War One happen? Okay, you can work a little bit further backwards to what led up to this why of World War One happening, and then you can work forward from there. But you have to have a tag. You have to have this event that happened, and what if it didn't happen, or what if it happened differently? And the thing about history, particularly the idea of both what if Germany won World War One or World War Two, is you have the major points like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, unrestricted submarine warfare, the Zimmerman letters. Those are what I would call potential major points of difference, but inside the conflict itself, you have smaller points. Particularly with World War II, what if the German military wasn't as factional as it was? Because Hitler specifically set up the different branches of the German military to be factional and to fight internally in the administration for resources. So they weren't always working the Army, Navy, Air Force, and their sub branches always didn't work or coordinate and work the best with each other, because there was always kind of this competition for resources in Hitler's favor so that he would grant resources. Then you have, what if Germany didn't focus so much on the Wunderwaffen? And you have these smaller points within a conflict that you can really go multiple ways. But when we're talking about alt history, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the major events. What could Germany have done if Germany had done something differently and won the Battle of Britain and forced an armistice with Britain? That's the major point, and you kind of have to work backwards when dealing with alt history, because history has already happened.
And work from there. But there immediately becomes a problem. In the case of this Central Powers winning World War I scenario we're trying to make, we cannot move forward simply from the premise. We have to work backwards to find a specific event to change history to suit the scenario that we're trying to build. It seems contradictory to my previous statement of not working.
So, what he's talking about here is, if you're not working from a point of divergence from a major event in history, basically what he's talking about is just building his own history, as if you're not working with a tagline, you're not working with something that already happened. And, you know, alt history is building its own history, but you kind of get what I'm trying to say, I think.
Backwards, but there's a nuance to this approach that should be noted. Instead of resolving problems with one or many points of divergence and skipping to the end result, we are instead trying to find one point of divergence that would lead to the outcome we want to see. Let's use this Germany wins World War I premise as a baseline. We want Germany to win World War I, but how do we do that? Here's my process applied to this scenario. Take a step back and ask the question, what if the Germans won in the Battle of Verdun? Take a serious hard look at all the conditions leading to that point. If that point of divergence did not reach the outcome we were hoping for, we take another step back. Keep doing this until you find a chain of events that leads to the main element of the scenario that you want to pursue. Now, to be frank, this is a lot of work.
What? That's working backwards. That's not working forwards. Like, whenever the alt history channels that I watch and the alt history scenarios that I watch, all of the creators do this exact same method. And guess what? That's working backwards. That's not working forwards. You start with your premise. Then you work backwards. Okay, why did Germany lose this? Okay. Why did Germany lose that? What happened here? And you keep working backwards until you can work out a problem to change the point of convergence. That's not working
especially
forwards.
For more outlandish scenarios. However, there is a major benefit to this approach. For one, you're actually making alternate history. You've established a single point of divergence and continued a theoretical line of events resulting from this alternate event and created a timeline. Congratulations! But the secondary benefit is that you've established a baseline for the rest of your world, and if you do it properly, every single subsequent question regarding your world can be answered by the point of divergence that you've established. An example of this working well is Project Stresa. This timeline started with me trying to get a reason for the Stresa front to form and stay united, hence the name. I figured that the annexation of Austria following World War I would have led to a containment policy against Germany in France, Italy, and Britain. However, after I started following the exact line of what if Austria united with Germany in 1919, it quickly became something else. The Austrians would be supported by German history while France supported the Rhinish.
A potential.
The two would begin to be geopolitical.
Because the reason why Austria and Germany never united in the past was basically a difference in religion. Because, and you know, forming the great state of Austro-Hungary. So once that happened, that was out of the bag. But again, working backwards, what is the point? Germany could have annexed Austria. Bismarck brought Austria to their knees, but he said, you know, something Catholic pigs, something will never be a part of Germany, something. So I don't know. Working back, like I said, I don't know. All right, now I have to look it up. Unification, 1919. They attempted to form a union with Germany, but the 1919 Treaty of Saint-Germain and Versailles forbade both the union and the continued use of the name German Austria. That's really specific. Austria of some of its territories, such as the Sudetenland. So that's a non-starter. This is a non-starter scenario of German-Austrian unification because this is after World War I, so Germany has been completely stripped of its military. Austria has no military whatsoever because, you know, their military was mostly consisted of the whole empire. But had they attempted to do this in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles and Saint-Germain, the Allies wouldn't have formed a containment policy. They would have marched across the border. There would have been no containment policy. And the militaries of Germany and Austria would have been so weak at that point that even with the Allies' shrunken militaries for post-war, their militaries would have been strong enough to basically walk all the way to Berlin and Vienna. So this scenario is kind of a non-starter anyway, if we're talking about working forward.
Be aligned. The Stavinsky affair, which I learned about during my research, would be a great opportunity for the far right in France to take charge. 2 out of the 3 nations in the Stresa front were now fascist, but Britain wouldn't want to align with them and gain sympathy for Germany. Appeasement continues, with events inspired by real history and eventually leads to a Second World War. And all the decisions I made in this alternate history scenario and its plot can be boiled down to: this happened because that happened because Austria united with Germany in 1919. Now,
But I feel like fairly simply explained, Austro-German unification in 1919, because let's see here. When did World War I end? November 1918. Germany has no army to speak. The Weimar Republic, and especially Austria, they have no army to speak of. Had they attempted to reunite, the Allies would have just walked across the border and slapped them on the back of the head and went, no, no.
that's a good example of how working forwards works. But don't just take my word for it. We can look to other popular scenarios for example of how this approach works. What better of a comparison to our exercise than Kaiserreich? Kaiserreich, the mod that inspired everyone to ask the question, what if insert country won World War I, and turn it into a Hearts of Iron 4 mod. Everyone looks to this mod as the quintessential Central Powers victory scenario. But what if I told you that this scenario started as a, how do we get Kerensky in charge of Russia? Yep, you heard that right.
Oh, that's
the initial theorization of Kaiserreich's lore was simply a thought experiment to get Kerensky in charge of Russia.
I couldn't find a source for this, but I remember Dev telling me this once.
They justified this by having the whites win the Civil War through Germany's support, because the Kaiser stayed in power, because the USA didn't join the war. So the cordon sanitaire and buffer states led to direct connections with Germany, and therefore no Soviet Union. However, due to the lack of success of Leninism in the East, it leads to syndicalism, a left-wing movement in Western Europe, to become more prominent, leading to revolts in the defeated powers of Britain, France, and Italy. The premise of the mod is simply, what if Germany won World War I? But the point of divergence is, Germany wins World War I because the USA doesn't get involved due to limited submarine warfare. And that was the single point of divergence. But the initial question that got them to Germany wins World War I is, how do we get Kerensky in charge? So they asked the question, they took steps back until they got exactly what they needed to, and it developed into something else. And it's a complete world because of it. Now,
That's
you may
still
have noticed,
working backwards.
Kaiserreich's point of divergence of German submarine warfare not engaging the USA into the Great War is the exact point of divergence that I claimed is not particularly plausible when I first started this video. What gives? Does that mean that I think Kaiserreich is a bad scenario? In order to answer that, we need to take a deeper...
This is making me irrationally angry, and I don't know why. Because... this is he's like, this is how he keeps saying this is how you work forward, but every single example he's given of working forward is working backwards. How do we get how do we get Kerensky in charge? What if Kerensky was in charge or came to power? Are the exact same point. Okay, now what would have to happen before Kerensky takes charge for, stay with me, for him to take charge? Okay, so the reason he didn't take charge was this. Okay, what led to this and what could have changed with it? Okay, we go back again, and then we go back again, and then we go back again. Working forward is Working forward is what happens when you get mods like TNO or Thousand Week Reich, I think. Because it's forward. I think he's making this more complicated than it needs to be. Kind of like how years ago, like a few years ago, everyone was upset by a new quote unquote new math technique that they were teaching in schools. I can't remember what it's called. But basically it's last 15. Yeah, go ahead, Strat. We ended the stream early. But basically it's how do you add what's an easier way to add numbers? Common Core, Turning Worlds, that's it. Common Core. Yeah, I remember a few years ago everybody was pissed as hell at Common Core. They're overcomplicating math. And they were overcomplicating math because what they were doing was they were trying to explain in an overcomplicated way how most people, at least most people that I knew, learned how to add larger numbers. Like say, adding 53 to 123. Okay, you break it down into smaller chunks. Okay, you split 123 into 123. Then what I say, 52? I don't remember. Then you split 52 into 50 and 2, and you add those smaller numbers up. It's something that a lot of people learned how to do intuitively, or their teachers had taught them, but when they tried to break down the method into a course kind of explanation, it overcomplicated the teaching of the method. It's I think how they're teaching it is stupid, but it is it's a basic principle of doing math. And you even do it with multiplication. I mean, we're taught intuitively to do it with multiplication. How do you multiply 10 by 20? Okay. You drop the 0 on the 20. And then you can add it back. Like, oh, God damn it. Now I'm going to get out MS Paint. I'm so in the weeds with this, okay? Our premise, 10 times 20. How do we do this? Okay. You can do it any way. You take 10 times 20. You take the trailing 0, you dump it over here, and you just drop it instantly. God damn it! I didn't need the confidence. Okay. 2 times 0 is 0. So that's 0, and then 2 times 1 is 2. 200. I don't know how to stop this. Anyway, I hope you heard me over the coffin dance, but in essence, this is Common Core. And that's been taught in schools forever. I don't know how to clear this. I don't know what I'm doing in Paint. You're right. I am not Pirate Software. And in essence, this is something that was already taught, but when they tried to make a wholly standardized method, they overcomplicated how it's done. Nice, we're doing this again. It's time to shine, yeah. But I think he's overcomplicating the method to coming up with alt history scenarios than it really needs to be. It's something that, yes, there's a good way and a bad way to do it. If you just go, hey, I just wanted to make a world. What if Germany won such and such? What if da 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 da? And they don't explain why, and they just kind of poop out an alt history. Old man yells at math, and they just poop out an alt history scenario. Yeah, that's bad. But the way, like, I like what Cody does with Alt History Hub, because he goes back divergence point by divergence point and explains why such and what could have happened at such and such for this to change. Okay, for that to change, we have to go back a little bit, but a lot of times he doesn't go into the weeds of an alt history scenario when explaining it, because I'm pretty sure one of my favorite quotes from a movie, Looper, the time travel movie with the Die Hard guy and Third Rock from the Sun kid, when they meet in the diner and he goes, I'm not going to explain time travel with you because we'll be here all day making diagrams out of straws and shit.